I unlocked the door to my new brownstone, expecting the silence of a fresh start. Instead, I heard numbers. 36 by 72, my sister Sarah announced, standing on a step stool in the center of my living room. Mom, write down navy velvet. The baby needs total darkness to sleep. My mother Heather was dutifully taking notes in a binder. Neither of them looked at me. Excuse me, I asked, my key still tight in my hand. Sarah didn't even step down. She just glanced over her shoulder, looking annoyed. Oh. Hey Alyssa, you're early. We're just measuring the master bedroom for the nursery before the movers get here. They hadn't just broken in. They had already moved in. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand why my sister felt entitled to measure my windows for a nursery that didn't exist, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. I grew up in Minneapolis, a city where the winter cold seeps into your bones and stays there until May. My childhood felt a lot like that weather, functional cold and designed for survival, not comfort. I was what psychologists call a glass child. Do you know the term? It is usually used for siblings of sick or disabled children, but in my house it applied to the sibling of a golden child. It means you learn early on to be transparent. You become invisible so you don't shatter the fragile peace of the household. Sarah wasn't sick. She was just Sarah, the sun around which my parents, Heather and David, eagerly orbited. Sarah was the cheerleader, the prom queen, the one who needed things. I was Alyssa, the one who learned that asking for anything was a form of selfishness. I learned to look through myself so they didn't have to. The financial ledger of our family was a masterpiece of inequality. When I turned 18, my father sat me down with a spreadsheet. He explained the value of $1 and the importance of contributing to the household. I got a job at a coffee shop and paid them $1,000 a month to live in their basement. I bought my own groceries. I paid for my own community college tuition. I was proud of it. Actually, I thought I was earning their respect. Then Sarah got pregnant with her first child. She was 24, married to Tyler, a man whose primary ambition was to disrupt industries he didn't understand, and living in a rented condo. My parents threw them a baby shower that cost more than my entire year's tuition, but the real kicker was the push present. David. Heather bought Sarah a brand new minivan, fully loaded, leather seats, entertainment system, the works. It cost $25,000, they paid cash. When I saw it in the driveway shining under the street lights, I felt a physical pain in my chest. It's for the safety of the grandchild, my mother had said, catching me staring. You understand, Alyssa, safety is priceless. I understood. Safety was priceless for Sarah. For me, safety was something I had to rent for $1,000 a month. I spent my 20s perfecting the art of invisibility. I became a UX designer, a job literally focused on making things seamless, intuitive, and unnoticed. I saved every penny. I ate ramen. I wore clothes until they fell apart. I built a fortress of savings because I knew deep down that no one was coming to save me. My parents praised my independence, but what they really loved was my low maintenance. Alyssa is so low-key, they'd tell their friends, we never have to worry about her. They didn't worry because they didn't care. Being low maintenance is just a polite way of saying your needs are irrelevant, and that's how we ended up here. I had finally bought my dream home, a historic brownstone in a gentrified district of Minneapolis. It was beautiful, exposed brick, high ceilings, a fireplace that actually worked. It was the first thing in my life that was purely selfishly mine. I hadn't asked them for a dime. I hadn't even told them I was looking until the closing papers were signed. I thought buying this house would finally earn me a seat at the adult table. I thought they would look at me and see a successful, independent woman. I was wrong. They didn't see a home for me. They saw a resource for Sarah. They saw a vacant lot waiting to be developed for the golden child. I stood in my living room watching Sarah fold her tape measure with a snap. She looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and condescension. You really need to think about the layout, Alyssa, she said. This place has potential, but right now it's just a waste of space for one person. It's my space, I said. Well, sure, she shrugged. On paper, but we're family and family shares. Family shares, the mantra of the parasite. I realized then that my silence hadn't bought me peace. It had only bought them permission, and I was about to revoke it. The invasion didn't start with a bang. It started with a gift. That's how they operate. Toxic families don't storm the gates. They smuggle themselves in inside a wooden horse painted with love and generosity. 3 days after the measuring incident, my mother Heather texted me, stopping by with a housewarming present, be there in 10, Zoxo. I panicked. I was still unpacking. My defenses were down. I tried to text back. Not a good time, but she was already buzzing the intercom. I let her up. That was my first mistake. Heather swept into my apartment in a cloud of expensive perfume and passive aggression. She was carrying a bottle of wine, which was disarming, but behind her, my father, David, was wrestling a massive cardboard box through the door. Happy housewarming, Heather chirped, kissing the air next to my cheek. Where do you want this? I stared at the box. It was long, heavy, and labeled Pottery Barn Kids. What is that? I asked. Oh, it's just the crib, she said casually, waving a hand as if it were a bag of groceries from Sarah's old place. She bought the new convertible one for the toddler, so we needed somewhere to store this for the new baby. Store it, I repeated. Mom, this is my living room. I don't have a storage unit. Don't be silly. She laughed, taking the wine bottle to my kitchen and opening drawers until she found a corkscrew. You have that massive guest room, it's completely empty, it's just temporary. Alyssa, Sarah's house is so cluttered right now with the pregnancy and Tyler's hobbies. We just need a place to keep it safe until the baby comes. I looked at David, who was already leaning the box against my freshly painted wall. Dad, I don't want a crib in my guest room. I'm turning that into an office. David wiped his forehead, looking annoyed that he had to participate in the conversation. Alyssa, help your mother out, it's just a box, don't be difficult. Difficult, the magic word. The word that meant you are having boundaries and we don't like it. It's not just a box, I said, my voice tight. It's furniture for a baby that doesn't live here yet. Heather muttered under her breath. Then she turned, beaming, pouring wine into a mug because I hadn't unpacked the glasses yet. Oh, relax, it's a gift. Really, if you ever, meet someone, you'll already have it. Saves you money, the implication hung in the air. You are single, alone, and behind schedule. At least be useful to the sister who is winning. I looked at the box. It wasn't a gift, it was an anchor. It was a physical claim on my square footage. By leaving it here, they were establishing a precedent. Sarah's needs supersede Alyssa's space. If I kept it, the crib would eventually be assembled, then the changing table would arrive. Then the baby. I can't keep it, I said, take it back. Heather Unk's smile dropped, the mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. We drove 40 minutes to bring this here, we are not hauling it back, it stays, end of discussion. She took a sip of wine, looking around my apartment with a critical eye. Besides, she added, we need to talk about the long-term plan anyway. This arrangement, it's cute, but it's not practical. What arrangement? I asked. You living here alone, she said, in a 3-bedroom historic brownstone while your sister is pregnant in a starter home with a postage stamp yard. We need to sit down and talk about logistics. I felt a cold prickle of dread on the back of my neck. This wasn't a visit, it was a scouting mission. They were measuring the perimeter, checking the locks, and planting their flag. The crib wasn't for storage, it was the advanced guard. I think you should leave, I said. We just got here, Heather protested, and we brought takeout, Thai food, your favorite. She pulled containers out of a bag I hadn't noticed. Pad Thai green curry. The smell filled the room, spicy, rich, and suffocating. It was another trap. Look how nice we are, we brought food. How can you be so ungrateful? I watched them settle onto my cooch. David turning on my TV, Heather plating food on my counter. They looked so comfortable, like they belonged, like they owned the place. And in their minds they did because they owned me. I realized then that asking them to leave wouldn't work. They didn't hear requests. They only heard compliance or rebellion. And tonight they were going to get a rebellion they never saw coming. Fine, I said. Let's eat. I sat down, my stomach churning. I needed to hear the plan. I needed to know exactly how crazy they were before I burned the bridge. The dinner began with a terrifying normally. We ate pad thai out of cartons. David complained about the traffic on I-94. Heather critiqued my choice of throw pillows. A bit drab, don't you think? It was the kind of mundane family friction I had endured for 29 years. But the tension was there, humming underneath the conversation like a high-voltage wire. Finally, David wiped his mouth with a paper napkin and leaned back. He clasped his hands over his stomach, the pose of the patriarch about to dispense wisdom. So he said, your mother and I have been crunching the numbers. What numbers? I asked, pushing a piece of tofu around my plate. For the family. He said, look, Alyssa, we're proud of you. Buying this place, it's a big step, good investment, but we have to be realistic about the family's needs. He paused, waiting for me to nod. I didn't. Sarah is pregnant again, he continued. Number 2, you know that their current place in the suburbs, it's fine, but the yard is tiny. The schools are okay, but not great, and Tyler's commute is killing him. Okay, I said. Exactly, Heather chimed in, her eyes lighting up. That's what we thought. They need to move. And you? Well, you're here in the city, close to all the hip bars and whatever it is you do. I work, I said. Right, you work, she waved a hand. But you're single, you don't need 3 bedrooms, you don't need a school district, you don't need a backyard. I have a garden, I said. I like my garden. It's a patio. Alyssa, David corrected. It's not a yard for children. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that serious, let's reasonable tone. Here's the plan, he said. We want you to swap with Sarah. I blinked. The words didn't make sense. Swap what? Houses, he said. Permanently. You take their starter home. It's perfect for a single girl. Low maintenance, safe neighborhood, and Sarah and Tyler, they take this place. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear my own heart thumping against my ribs. You want me to give them my house? I asked. Swap. Heather corrected. You get theirs. It's fair trade. We did the math. Their equity as well. It's a bit lower, obviously, but we figured you could just sign over the deed, they sign over theirs, and we call it even. For the grandchildren, call it even. I laughed. It was a dry, breathless sound. Dad, this house is worth double what theirs is. I put a 20% down payment on this. I renovated the kitchen. I researched the neighborhood for 2 years. Money isn't everything, Heather snapped. God, you're so transactional. This is about family. Sarah needs this. She's giving us grandchildren. She's building a future. You're just you. There it was, the truth naked and shivering in the middle of my living room. In their eyes, I wasn't a person. I was a placeholder. I was a resource to be harvested until I was empty. Sarah wasn't there, but her presence was heavy in the room. I imagined her at home rubbing her belly, smiling that golden smile, waiting for Mommy and Daddy to bring her the keys to my castle. Sarah know about this? I asked. It was her idea, David admitted. She saw the photos you posted. She fell in love with the nursery potential. The nursery, I said, in my master bedroom. It has the best light, Heather said, as if that explained everything. I looked at them, really looked at them. My father with his entitlement masked as logic, my mother with her cruelty masked as care. They weren't asking, they were informing. They truly believed I would say yes. They believed I was so desperate for their approval, so conditioned to be the good one that I would light myself on fire just to keep Sarah warm. No, I said. Heather blinked. Excuse me. No, I said again, stronger this time. I am not swapping houses. I am not moving. This is my home. I bought it. It's mine. Alyssa, David warned, his voice deepening. Don't be selfish. Think about the baby. I don't care about the baby, I said. The words felt like blasphemy in our family religion, but they tasted like freedom. I care about me. I care about my life, and I am not setting myself back 10 years financially so Sarah can have a brick wall for Instagram. Heather stood up, her face flushing pink. How dare you, after everything we've done for you? What have you done? I asked, standing up too. Besides, charge me rent since I was 18. Besides, ignore me until you needed something. You haven't done anything for me. I did this. I built this and you are not taking it. You are being a brat, David spat. A jealous, bitter brat. I have this house, I said, and I have the deed, and now I'm asking you to leave. We're not leaving until we settle this. Heather crossed her arms. We're sleeping in the guest room. We'll talk about this in the morning when you've calmed down. They thought they could wait me out. They thought they could occupy my space until I suffocated. Get out, I said. No, David said. He picked up the remote and turned up the volume on the TV. I looked at them sitting there, my parents, my invaders, and I realized that arguing was useless. You can't negotiate with terrorists and you can't reason with parasites. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. If you are not out in 5 minutes, I said, I'm calling the police. Heather laughed. You wouldn't dare. Where are your parents? Try me, I said. I pulled out my phone and dialed 3 numbers. 911. I held my thumb over the call button, staring David in the eye. He saw it then. He saw the coldness in my face. He saw the stranger I had become. You're crazy, he muttered. He stood up, grabbing his coat. Come on, Heather, she's hysterical. I can't believe this, Heather hissed, grabbing her purse. Over a house, you're choosing a building over your family. Yes, I said. I am. They stormed out past me, leaving the scent of Thai food and entitlement in their wake. I slammed the door, I locked the deadbolt, then I locked the chain. Then I slid down to the floor, my back against the wood, and I waited for the shaking to stop. But it didn't stop because I knew with absolute certainty that they still had a key. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair facing the front door, a baseball bat leaning against my knee. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every car passing outside sounded like my father's truck. The next morning I didn't go to work. I called a locksmith, emergency service, the dispatcher asked. Yes, I said, I need every lock changed. Front door, back door, patio, and I need dead bolts installed on the interior doors too. Interior doors, just do it, I said. The locksmith arrived at 8:00 a.m. He was a burly guy named Mike with a gentle face. He didn't ask questions, but he saw the dark circles under my eyes and worked fast. As he drilled into the metal, the sound was aggressive and comforting. ZZ. While he worked, I went online and ordered a security system. Cameras for the front porch, the back alley, the living room, sensors for the windows, a doorbell that recorded audio. I spent $2,000 in 20 minutes. It was the best money I had ever spent. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since they left. Heather, David, Sarah, Tyler, even my Aunt Linda, who lived in Florida and hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. Alyssa, call your mother. She is devastated. I heard you kick them out. What is wrong with you? Sarah is crying. Stress is bad for the baby. Fix this. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't block them yet. I needed to see what they were planning, but I muted the notifications. At noon, Mike the locksmith handed me a set of shiny new keys. You're all set, he said. These are high-security cylinders. Nobody's picking these. An unauthorized duplication is impossible. You need a card to get copies made. Thank you, I said. I took the keys. They felt heavy, cold, real. I locked the door behind him and tested it. Click, solid. I walked through my house, touching the walls, my walls. Yesterday this place had felt like a battleground. Today it felt like a fortress. But the fear lingered. They had a key, not to the new locks, obviously, but to the old ones. And in their minds, possession was 9/10 of the law. They didn't operate on legalities, they operated on audacity. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the wine Heather had brought down the sink. I threw the mugs they had used into the trash. I couldn't bear to wash them. I wanted their DNA, their fingerprints, their energy out of my space. Then I looked at the crib box, still leaning against the wall in the hallway. Pottery Barn Kids, I grabbed a box cutter, I sliced the tape, I broke the cardboard down flat, I dragged the pieces of the crib headboard rails mattress support out to the alley and leaned them against the dumpster. It started to snow lightly as I stood there shivering in my sweater. The snow fell on the expensive white wood of the crib. It looked like a skeleton. Free, I whispered. I went back inside and locked the door, click, but I knew the war wasn't over. It was just moving to a new front. I sat down at my computer. They were going to play dirty. I needed to know the rules. I started searching. I looked up eviction laws, I looked up trespassing statutes, and then on a hunch I logged into Facebook. I wasn't a big Facebook user, but my mother lived on it. She was the queen of the Minneapolis moms groups, curating an image of the perfect grandmother. I navigated to her profile. It was locked down, mostly photos of Sarah's kids. But then I went to the group she was active in. I scrolled past the cookie recipes, past the complaints about school boards, and then I saw it. A post from Heather dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before the ambush dinner, 2 weeks before they even asked me to swap. My blood ran cold. The post was simple, cheerful, deadly. Available November 1st. Gorgeous garden-level suite in historic brownstone. Private bath, separate entrance via garage. Perfect for a student or living nanny looking for help with a newborn and toddler in exchange for reduced rent in this luxury home. PM for details. Attached were photos. My photos, the ones from the real estate listing I had bought the house from. The kitchen with the granite island, the guest bedroom with the bay window. They hadn't just assumed I would swap houses. They had already listed my spare room for rent. They were planning to move a stranger into my home, a living nanny for Sarah's kids. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning. The audacity was so vast it was almost impressive. They weren't just going to take the house. They were going to monetize it. They were going to turn my sanctuary into a staff dormitory for Sarah's domestic empire. I clicked on the comments. Wow, Heather, that looks amazing. Is this Sarah's new place? Yes, they are upgrading, so proud of them. Interested, sent you a PM. I took a screenshot, then another. I scrolled back. I found another post from a month ago, looking for recommendations for contractors. Need to knock down a wall in a historic brownstone to create an open-concept nursery. Asking for my daughter. Had been planning this renovation before I even closed on the property. They must have seen the listing when I did realize I was buying it and immediately claimed it as family property. This wasn't an impulse. This was a conspiracy. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It wasn't the hot, shaky anger of yesterday. This was different. This was the clarity of a sniper. They weren't just toxic. They were fraudulent. I started digging deeper. I checked Sarah's Instagram. There it was, a story. Highlight titled New Home Inspo. Photos of my living room taken through the window. Had they come by before with stickers saying soon and manifesting? I realized then that to them I wasn't a person with property rights. I was a holding company. I was a temporary custodian of assets that rightfully belonged to the golden child. I compiled everything, the screenshots, the dates, the text messages where they demanded the swap. I saved it all to a cloud drive labeled evidence. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I'd like to file a report, I told the officer, for harassment and potential fraud. Is this a domestic issue? The dispatcher asked, sounding bored. It involves family members, I said, but they are attempting to list my property for rent without my consent. And I believe they have a key they stole. If they have a key, ma'am, it's a civil matter. You gave it to them. No, I said I didn't give it to them, but they have it. And I'm worried they're going to use it. If they enter the property without your permission, call 911, she said. Until then, it's just a family dispute. Change your locks. I did. I said, then you're safe, she said. Have a nice day. I hung up. I wasn't safe. I knew my family. They didn't stop when they hit a locked door. They kicked it down. I spent the rest of the day fortifying I set up the cameras, I tested the motion sensors. I notified my boss I would be working from home for the rest of the week due to a security issue. And then I waited. Wednesday passed in silence. Thursday passed. The silence was worse than the shouting. It was the deep breath before the plunge. On Friday morning my phone alerted me. Motion detected front porch. I pulled up the app on my phone. On the screen Sarah was standing on my porch jiggling the handle. She dug into her purse and pulled out a key, a shiny silver key that I recognized instantly. It was the spare I kept in the kitchen drawer. They had stolen it during the Trojan horse visit. She slid the key into the lock and turned it. Nothing happened. She frowned, she jiggled it. She pulled it out, blew on it and tried again. She leaned her shoulder against the wood, shoving it, then she stepped back and pulled out her phone. A text popped up on my screen. Alyssa, I'm at the house, the key isn't working. Did you change the locks? I need to get into measure for the rug. Mom is meeting me here with the contractor. The contractor, the wall demolition, they weren't just visiting, they were starting construction. I didn't reply. On the screen, a white van pulled up. Miller Construction. They gathered on my porch like generals surveying a battlefield. David pounded on the door. Alyssa, open up, we have an appointment. I wasn't home. I was at the coffee shop down the street watching the feed. My heart was hammering but my hands were steady. David walked around the side of the house. I switched to the backyard camera. He was trying the back door locked. He looked around the garden, my garden, and picked up a landscaping brick from the border. David, don't. Heather's voice came through the audio, tiny and distorted. I'm not waiting, he shouted. We have a schedule, she's being ridiculous. He smashed the brick through the glass pane of the back door. The sound of shattering glass was loud, crisp and final. He reached through, unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Come on, he waved them in. They walked into my house. Sarah, Heather, David and the contractor. They walked right into my living room. I closed the app. I dialed 911. Emergency, the operator said. My address is 412 Oak Street, I said. I am watching a break-in on my security cameras. 3 intruders, one armed with a brick. They have entered the premises. Are you in the house? No, I said. I'm down the street. I'm going there now. Stay where you are, ma'am. Officers are dispatched. I'm meeting them there, I said, and I hung up. I arrived at the house at the same time as the second squad car. The lights were flashing, painting the snow-covered street in frantic bursts of red and blue. It was a spectacle. The neighbors were coming out onto their porches, wrapped in blankets, watching the drama unfold. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the ice. An officer intercepted me. Ma'am, stay back. This is an active crime scene. I'm the homeowner, I said, holding up my ID. Alyssa Vance, I called it in. Okay, stay behind the car. We have officers clearing the building. I stood there, arms crossed against the cold, and watched. 2 minutes later, the front door opened. Officer Miller, a tall, unsiling man, marched David out in handcuffs. David looked bewildered. He wasn't fighting, but he was shouting, "This is a mistake. It's my daughter's house. We're family. I was just letting us in." Heather followed, not in cuffs, but guided by a female officer. She was crying, clutching her pearls. We have a key, we have a key. She changed the locks on us. Then Sarah, she wasn't crying. She looked furious. Do you know who my husband is? She was demanding of a patrolman. We have a contractor appointment. We're renovating. They lined them up on the sidewalk. The contractor, looking terrified, was sitting on the bumper of the ambulance, explaining that he had just been hired to knock down a wall. Officer Miller walked over to me. Miss Vance, do you know these people? The question hung in the freezing air. David looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and command. Tell him, Alyssa, tell him it's a misunderstanding. Fix this. Heather was sobbing. Alyssa, tell them we're your parents. I looked at them. I looked at the broken glass on my porch. I looked at the brick David had used to smash his way into my life. I know them, I said. My voice was clear. It carried across the lawn. That is my father, my mother, and my sister. David sagged with relief. See, I told you. Now get these cuffs off me. However, I continued, locking eyes with Officer Miller. They do not live here. They do not have keys, and they did not have permission to enter. I watched him break the window. I want to press charges for breaking and entering and destruction of property. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow. Alyssa, Heather screamed, "What are you doing? We're family." Officer, I said, turning away from her, I have the deed to this house. It is in my name only. I have the video footage of the break-in. I want them removed from my property and I want a restraining order. Officer Miller nodded. He turned back to David. Sir, you're under arrest for burglary. Have the right to remain silent. You ungrateful little bee. David roared, struggling against the cuffs as they pushed him toward the cruiser. After everything we did for you, you're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. I heard you, I whispered. I watched them load him into the car. I watched Heather get into another one, hysterical. I watched Sarah stand there shivering in her designer coat, realizing for the first time in her life that her golden status didn't work on the legal system. You can leave. Officer Miller told Sarah, or you can leave in cuffs. She looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only shock. You ruined everything, she spat. The nursery, the family, everything. No, I said, I just locked the door. You're the ones who broke it down. She got into her car and drove away. I stood on my lawn as the sirens faded. The neighbors were staring. The window was broken. My family was gone. And for the first time in 29 years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like victory. The aftermath was messy, legal, and expensive, but it was worth every penny. David pleaded down to misdemeanor trespassing and destruction of property. He got probation and a fine. The restraining order was granted for 5 years, a permanent legal wall between us. Heather sent me letters for a while, guilt trips masked as scripture, honor thy father and mother. I returned them unopened. Eventually they stopped. Sarah blocked me on everything. I heard through a mutual friend that she had to stay in her starter home. The baby was born. They named her Grace. I sent a card but no gift. The card was returned. I repaired the back door. I replaced the glass with reinforced steel. 6 months later I was sitting in my reading nook. The sun was streaming through the bay window, the same window Sarah had measured for blackout curtains. It was warm. The light hit the floorboards, turning them gold. There is a philosophy I read once about the peace of the burning bridge. We are taught that burning bridges is a bad thing, that it's destructive, that it leaves you stranded, but sometimes burning a bridge is the only way to stop the enemy from crossing back over. The fire is scary. Yes, it's hot and it destroys the path behind you, but it also illuminates the path forward. I looked around my living room. It was quiet, it was mine, there was no crib, no parents telling me I was selfish, no sister measuring my life to see how much of it she could take. I had burned the bridge, and in the light of the flames I could finally see who I was. I wasn't the glass child anymore. I was solid, I was opaque, I was here. If you've ever had to burn a bridge just to keep yourself from drowning, share this story. You are not the villain in your own history, you're just the survivor.